At a place where days and nights blend together, the work to clear a tower of rubble goes on.
And while workers search for a miracle, authorities try to track down those responsible.
And some protest in Pakistan against expected US attacks on their neighbours, Afghanistan. Hello, I'm Michael Holmes.
Welcome back. I'm Colleen McEdwards at CNN Center. This is CNN's continuing coverage of America's new war. Michael?
Yeah, well, it has been several days since a person was last pulled alive out of the rubble of what was the World Trade Center in New York City, but authorities there are refusing to give up hope. Let's go now to some live pictures of the around-the-clock rescue operations taking place. There you go. And it does blend from day into night there with those arc lights there blaring down onto the site. Officials say it's still too early to shift the efforts from rescue to recovery, and that is keeping hope alive for families and friends of nearly 5,000 people who remain missing.
An enormously important day for world financial markets. In just over 5 hours, the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ will reopen for business. Security has been heightened ahead of the opening. It is the first day back for the U.S. market since those attacks.
Yeah, and as those traders return to their jobs, other Americans are also being urged to try to return to life as it was before the attacks, as much as that is possible. US President George W. Bush says that's the only way to show the terrorists and the rest of the world that the country is strong.
We have got a job to do. Just like the farmers and ranchers and business owners and factory workers have a job to do, my administration has a job to do. And we're going to do it. We will rid the world of the evildoers.
The investigation into Tuesday's attacks is being called the largest in US history, taking agents across the country and the globe. On Sunday, the FBI searched apartments in both Florida and also in New Jersey. They say those apartments have ties to either suspected hijackers or accomplices. Now, in another development we'd like to bring to you, 2 new arrest warrants have been issued for material witnesses. Mike Betcher has more on that.
The FBI was back at this apartment house in South Florida, taking away evidence. It's believed to be the residence of Saeed Al-Ghamdi, one of the suspected hijackers on United Flight 93. At least one other hijacker on the same flight may have lived in the same building. All over the country, leads are being pursued. 2 more arrests for material witnesses were issued. 2 people are already in custody. And in New Jersey, just across the river from New York, another apartment was searched. This one was the residence of one, possibly both men, picked up off an Amtrak train allegedly carrying cash, airline tickets, and box cutters. But the top of the most wanted list has not changed and will not, according to U.S. officials. But the effort to add suspect names after Osama bin Laden is accelerating both in the U.S. and internationally.
He headed it up and organized it, but it's a very broad, kind of loose coalition of groupings. It includes not only his forces, but it also includes, for example, Islamic Jihad from Egypt.
Members of Egyptian Islamic Jihad filled the top ranks of bin Laden's al-Qaeda organization. Islamic Jihad's leader, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, was at bin Laden's side during this 1998 press conference. Widely considered bin Laden's chief lieutenant, Zawahiri is also his personal doctor. Like bin Laden, he's believed to be in Afghanistan. Bin Laden denied he was responsible in a statement released Sunday through an Arabic-language satellite news channel. As for me, I have been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following its leader's rules, he said. The current leader does not allow me to exercise such operations.
He's a prime suspect, but we have to be realistic. This is not a person. That's the problem. It is a whole host of people and a whole host of countries that are harboring those people.
The head U.S. officials are sure of, bin Laden, but hidden under the cloak of al-Qaeda's mastermind, a complex organization, harder to identify, and just as their leader, elusive. Mike Betcher, CNN, Atlanta.
And as the investigation zeroes in on Osama bin Laden, a high-level Pakistani delegation has arrived in Afghanistan with a message from Washington. It wants Afghanistan's ruling Taliban to hand over bin Laden. It's the U.S. chief suspect in the attacks. And joining us now, Mike Chinoy, who is in Islamabad with the very latest there. Mike, what can you tell us about the status of this delegation at this point?
Colleen, the Pakistani delegation is now in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar. That's normally the residence of Mullah Omar, who is the leader of the Taliban. The Pakistani delegation is headed by General Mahmoud. He's the chief of the ISI, Pakistan's military intelligence. This is the organization which, over the past half dozen years or so, has been a strong supporter of the Taliban, helped to put the Taliban in power and keep it in power in Afghanistan. He will be carrying a message from Pakistan's president urging the Taliban to turn Osama bin Laden over to the United States or else risk very, very grave consequences. Pakistani officials are not describing it as an ultimatum, and they say there's no specific timetable. The Pakistani delegation is expected back here in Islamabad on the end of the day on Monday. But Pakistan's foreign minister said that Pakistan, in fact, has limited influence with the Taliban.
Well, Pakistan has always sought to give correct counsel. We have always emphasized in the past that it is important for Afghanistan and its people that the government should act in conformity with international law. Of course, the assumption that Pakistan is in a position to exercise complete influence is flawed in our opinion. We have constantly pointed out to our friends that we have diplomatic relations, but that doesn't necessarily translate into great influence.
In fact, the nature of the bin Laden organization is a complex one. He has recruited over the years soldiers from many Arab countries, from the Gulf, who've used the wild and chaotic conditions in Afghanistan and the tolerance of the Taliban to have training bases and to plan and develop operations. In fact, some analysts believe that bin Laden's own forces are powerful enough that it would be difficult for the Taliban to turn him over, even if the Taliban wanted to do so. There is no indication at this point that the Taliban intends to heed Pakistan's call. Meanwhile, we are hearing that at some point in the next few days, a high-level interagency delegation from the United States, consisting of military officials, intelligence officials, diplomats, will be coming here to Islamabad for further discussions as Pakistan seeks to further develop its cooperation with the United States.
The discussions that we have held with the government of the United States deal with principles in general. Pakistan will extend full cooperation in the fight against terrorism. As for the specifics, we expect consultations, and we understand from the news that a group of high-level officials from the United States will be visiting Pakistan in the near future. We would like also to know the plan that the United States has in mind, and then we will discuss what and to what extent Pakistan can be a partner in the fight against terrorism.
One of the key areas of cooperation is likely to be intelligence. Pakistan's military intelligence service, the ISI, as I said, has had a long-standing relationship with the Taliban, and its leaders and members are likely to be very well-versed as anyone outside Afghanistan in how the Taliban leadership operates, its movements, its communications, and that kind of intelligence would be great value to the United States. There's also been talk about Pakistan allowing U.S. planes to overfly Pakistani airspace, perhaps prepositioning equipment here on the ground, maybe even putting U.S. troops on the ground. However, there has been a vocal chorus of criticism of the government's decision to side with the U.S., that criticism coming particularly from opposition parties and Islamic fundamentalist groups. On Sunday, there were demonstrations in several Pakistani cities. In a few hours' time, an organization called the Afghan Defense Council will be meeting in the city of Lahore to plot its strategy. There is a large reservoir of sympathy in this overwhelmingly Islamic nation for the neighboring ruling Islamic Nation of Afghanistan. Among Pakistan's Islamic fundamentalist groups, there have been some who have sought to turn Pakistan into a Taliban-style religious state. There's a great deal of cross-fertilization, religious schools here sending Pakistanis to fight with the Taliban in Afghanistan and then coming back. So the government does have a real challenge on its hands. President Musharraf spoke with Pakistani journalists on Sunday, said that he was well prepared to deal with this kind of challenge, but there is every expectation if the U.S. does launch military strikes that there will be a sharp response from at least some segments of the Pakistani population. Colleen?
Mike Chinoy, thanks very much. As we heard in Mike's segment there from Pakistan's foreign minister, he said Islamabad will help the United States despite concerns for difficulties that this will cause at home. I want to spend a little bit of time here on this. We're joined now from London by Abdul Qadir Jaffer, Pakistan's High Commissioner to Britain. A good chance to follow up on some of this. Mr. Jaffer, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, madam.
Okay,
it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. This delegation is there, but we're hearing expectations being downplayed a little bit from the foreign minister. Tell us what to expect. Does anyone really expect the Taliban to be able to hand over Osama bin Laden?
Well, I agree with you. We have embarked on a very difficult and a very important assignment, and that is truly to support the United States government and the world at large to eradicate this menace from all countries of the world. And if we can be successful in getting Osama bin Laden, I'm sure it will be a great cooperation from Pakistan, as we have always done in the past. We have always rendered assistance and cooperation to the United States of America.
Well, Mr. Jaffer, what happens if the Taliban will not hand him over?
Well, I suppose we'll have to again discuss this matter with the United States and see what other options we have. But most important, I think the effort has got to continue so that there is no loss of further innocent lives. I think this is extremely important. And I think this exercise which we have now undertaken is to see that if we are able to convince the Taliban of the gravity of the situation, I think it will be a great success.
Well, and what else is Pakistan prepared to do?
Well, Pakistan has agreed to provide all support, unstinted support, because we have been a victim of terrorism ourselves. You must have heard we have lost a lot of people in the recent past. Only a few months ago, we lost the chairman of Pakistan State Oil. So this happens in Pakistan too. But
how far are you willing to go? Sorry for interrupting, but what specifically does that mean? I mean, in your areas of intelligence gathering, for example, will you share that information?
This is for both the government to decide. As you have heard from the foreign minister, there is a delegation expected from the United States officials, and I'm sure they will have further discussions and decide how best to assist the United States to resolve this issue, and no further lives are lost, innocent lives are lost.
You know, I
think this is the most important concern of everyone.
We've been hearing a lot and talking a lot about the difficulty this presents for Pakistan at home, the very fact that cooperation with the U.S. could destabilize the government there.
It is a very delicate situation for Pakistan, but I think a decision has been taken. Corps commanders and the general met yesterday. There was a meeting also of the cabinet, so it just shows the seriousness and then the importance the government of Pakistan attaches to this matter and to this problem.
Well, is it possible that the U.S. is asking too much of Pakistan?
Well, this is a problem which faces the world. I don't think the United States government is asking Pakistan too much. I think we need to eradicate this menace. It is the responsibility of everyone in the world today to stop this happening. It may happen anywhere. And look at the amount of innocent lives lost. We should not encourage this. We should discourage this. And I am sure the Taliban realize the gravity of the situation. I'm sure they also want to eradicate this.
They're fine words at the diplomatic level and words that one might expect, but if things were to get dicey at home, if there were to be instability, if there were to be opposition, how far is Pakistan prepared to go in this support?
Well, the president has already started talking to the members of the opposition, all political parties and the media. He's trying to arrive at a consensus to see to what extent, to what maximum extent can we support the exercise we have now started and undertaken.
And what might Pakistan want in return from the United States?
Phil, this is for both the government to decide. I think most important for us all is to try and resolve this sad and tragic issue. I mean, I think it's a terrible tragedy which has befallen on the Americans. We share their grief, we share their sorrow.
Abdul Qadir Jaffer, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, madam.
Michael.
Thank you. Thank you.
Interesting stuff there. Well, US President George W. Bush is urging Americans to resume their daily routines and go back to work. For his part, the president gets back to the job on Monday when he meets with his economic team to monitor the reopening of the US stock markets. OK, Major Garrett is going to join us now from Washington with the very latest. Major.
Hey, Major.
Michael, in the early morning hours here Monday morning, a very important day ahead for the Bush White House as it, of course, continues to work diplomatic channels, review military options, and also attempt to signal to the entire U.S. economy and the entire American population now is time to get back to work, to get back to some of the basic routines in this country that were shattered by Tuesday's terroristic attacks. On Sunday, it was a day of prayer for the president in addition to meetings with his national security team. He went to private church services at Camp David, the presidential retreat in Maryland. Then he returned to the White House with First Lady Laura Bush. And upon his arrival in the South Lawn of the White House, came to the microphone to tell the American public that, yes, Monday was a very important day, a transition point to moving back to some sense of normality.
Today, millions of Americans mourned and prayed, and tomorrow we go back to work. Today, people from all walks of life gave thanks for the heroes. They mourned the dead. They asked for God's good graces on the families who mourn. And tomorrow, the good people of America go back to their shops, their fields, American factories, and go back to work. Our nation was horrified, but it's not going to be terrorized. We're a great nation. We're a nation of resolve. We're a nation that can't be cowed by evildoers. I got great faith in the American people. If the American people had seen what I had seen in New York City, you'd have great faith too.
A fascinating reference there, Michael, by the president. If you'd seen what I'd seen in New York, you'd have great faith, too. Let me show you a picture the White House recently released while the president was in New York City. He was touring Jacob Javits Center, meeting with family members of those firefighters and police officers who died in the downing or the crushing of the World Trade Center towers. This is not the photo that I wanted to show you. In fact, it is in the photo that I did want to show you. It's a photo of the president consoling a woman named Arlene Howard. She was in the Jacob Javits Center, and when the president came to talk with her and shake her hand, she gave the president a cherished memento. It was the badge of her son, a Port Authority police officer. His name was George Howard. He was killed in responding to the catastrophe at the World Trade Center towers. Of course, the World Trade Center is operated by the New York Port Authority. The president spent 3 hours in the Jacob Javits Center meeting with these families of firefighters and police officers. He was only scheduled to be there for about an hour and a half. He stayed an extra hour and a half to console each and every family member. Several senior White House aides simply could not bear the grief in that room. They had to step out. They could not handle it. It was too emotionally racking for them. But the president stayed each and every minute. And senior White House advisors say after that, the president was steeled with a sense that he must act in ways appropriate to relieve those families, at least in some small way, of their grief and be confident in leading the United States so that they know, however this eventual conflict with terrorism comes out, that their family members did not die in vain. Michael?
An emotional moment there, no doubt. Major, just before I let you go, the President's plans tomorrow, as you say, it's get back to work time. One assumes he'll be talking economics tomorrow. The stock market in the United States opens in just a little over 5 hours from now. Some people think the US is already in recession. Any talks planned?
Well, of course, all of us here on the overnight shift have to keep our tomorrows and todays straight. We're already in today land. The President will be getting up and getting in the Oval Office very shortly, in about 3 hours. He's always an early riser. Meeting with his economic team. That'll be the first formal meeting with his economic team, though no doubt the President has been in touch with his economic advisors throughout. Senior White House advisors have been reluctant to talk openly about the underlying economic effects of this catastrophe, feeling it's just far too crass to talk about dollars and cents at a time of such great tragedy and grief. But there is clearly a sense of wariness about how this will all affect the U.S. economy, which was struggling to regain its footing even before this. There are profound effects on a couple of major U.S. industries, the airline, Boeing, a major airline manufacturer, the insurance industry, and just the overall sense of consumer confidence. The President throughout the week will be trying to send reassuring signals to the American public that it's okay to get back to ordinary life, it's okay to spend, don't feel guilty about things such as that. But he'll also be working with Congress on maybe a tax cut package, maybe some extra spending for some particular relief efforts. All those things are on the table. But first and foremost, the President just wants to reassure the American public and try to get back within their mindsets a degree of confidence, short term and long term, about the U.S. economy. Michael.
All right, Major. Thanks very much. Major Garrett there, as always, in Washington. Colleen.
All right, Michael, thanks. Although many New Yorkers getting ready to go back to work, some are still waiting for news of colleagues, friends, or family members who are still missing. Rescue workers are searching through the night, as they do every night, for any signs of life. For more on what's going on in New York right now, let's go over to Alessio Vinci. Alessio?
Well, hello, Colleen. It's well past 4 a.m. in the morning here, and there is still a lot of activity surrounding the site where the two towers crashed. We just saw a couple of fire trucks passing by, police department vehicles. We're seeing another trucks coming by. It's really going full swing. Those rescue workers are working 24 hours a day, each doing 12 hours a shift. As you can see from these pictures live behind me, the building and the area where the two towers and the other building of the World Trade Center collapse are still a big pile of rubble, a lot of work to do for the rescue workers. And as you can also see, it is still smoldering. The twisted metal and the concrete is extremely hot, and it's making the rescue operation, of course, extremely difficult. However, the rescue operations and the rescue workers have not given up hope in trying to find somebody alive. They have been cheered by the people throughout the streets of New York. We have seen earlier as a group of firefighters walked away from the site, being cheered by this crowd of people, really trying to give them the energy to continue and excavate throughout this debris in order to be able to find some of the survivors. Mayor Giuliani saying that they're still having hope. However, many of the bodies that were inside the two towers may never be recovered. Back to you, Colleen.
Alessio, I saw some shots earlier sort of that looked down into that crater, and I saw ladders that looked like they had actually been strung together, and the fire officials and the rescue workers sort of moving very deliberately down those ladders. The conditions they face in there, despite the relatively good weather that they've had, the conditions must be awfully difficult.
They're awful, Colleen. It's wet, it's hot, it's stinky. It's really very difficult for those firefighters to crawl inside the lower levels of the World Trade Center. They're doing this because they really hope that perhaps underneath the levels beneath the World Trade Center, still some people may be alive. There were 7 levels underneath the Trade Center. There was shopping malls there. There was the subway station there. There are some shops with food, and perhaps possibly, conceivably, if somebody is still there alive, he would have access to water and food. And there was a faint possibility that inside that hole, perhaps one of the 5,000 people missing may still be alive, and therefore the rescue workers are doing all they can to go deep, deep, deep underneath the earth to be able to pull somebody out alive.
Well, and do you get any sense, I mean, I know you are where you are, do they give you any sense of how close the operation is to getting to that level?
I understood from one person who is talking to a fireman, who's a family member, who's a fireman working on the site, that they have already managed to reach some of the levels underneath the World Trade Center. How deep they went, I don't know. I know that they have already been able to go a little bit deeper, because we have seen from the pictures, those aerial pictures, that they were really crawling underneath the surface of the Earth. So certainly they are getting down there. However, as you can see also from the pictures that we have provided to you earlier, their aerials, there is an incredible amount of damage. Not just the 2 towers collapsed, but as much as 7 buildings, the entire World Trade Center. So there are still a lot of work to do. So far, 20,000 tons of debris has been removed. One rescue official telling us that as much as 500,000 tons of debris will have to be removed eventually. That's a staggering number, and the rescue official is telling us that it will take at least 2 months to get rid of it.
Staggering indeed. Alessio Vinci, thanks very much for that update. Michael?
Thanks, Colleen. Well, as we've been saying, New York Stock Exchange is reopen in just a few hours from now, about 5 hours in fact, for the first time since the attack. Security, as you might imagine, is high around Wall Street. Trading was suspended for 4 days last week, the longest halt since at least the Great Depression. Over the weekend, officials and traders tested equipment, reconnected phones and tried to make sure it is safe for workers to return, obviously a priority. Well, European markets have been up and running for more than an hour. Let's see what they're doing ahead of Wall Street's open.
Yeah, that's right. For that, we're joined by Richard Quest, who is in London with details, keeping a close eye on all of this for us. Richard, how's it looking now?
Good morning. It's 10:30 across Central Europe, 9:30 in the UK. And Europe's main stock markets are all sharply lower. There are, of course, worries about what will happen when Wall Street opens later this Monday. Taking a look at the numbers as they appear to us at the moment, all the major indices had been pretty much up and then down a bit. London's FTSE is now off 59 points. The Frankfurt DAX down 88, Paris down 95. Interestingly, that market had been up at the open. The Zurich SMI is down 115, the largest losses being seen in Switzerland, and that's because, of course, Swissair, which is seen a 15% reduction in its share value, is taking that market with it. But in 5 hours' time, the US markets open after the longest delay of trading since the Depression in the 1930s. And investors are bracing themselves for intense uncertainty. Some expect a patriotic rally. Others expect the market to fall. But analysts believe it'll be some time before we really know what's happening in the market.
It's going to be more of a symbolic opening than an actual opening today. I think volumes are likely to be less than some analysts are forecasting. This isn't the climate, I think, for mature, sensible investors to rush into investment decisions. There are just too many uncertainties, and I think there's going to be a wait-and-see attitude on behalf of many of the fund managers.
Todd Benjamin, our financial editor, joins us to give us some perspective. A patriotic rally, the potential for that. Basically, people going into the market to buy, a bit like in the 1920s with Rockefeller and Morgan.
Well, there's a lot of speculation about that, Richard, but I think the market's certainly going to open lower because of the events of last week and the way that both the European and Asian markets have reacted. Even if there is a patriotic rally, it'd probably be more on behalf of small retail investors and large institutions, although we know several companies have announced they're going to have share buybacks.
Is there more work for the central bank, the Fed, to do?
Absolutely. I mean, the Fed has been doing a yeoman's job, as it does in these times of great uncertainty. It injected massive amounts of liquidity into the market last week, some $80 billion worth. There's speculation that they will actually make an interest rate cut, possibly as soon as today, but that is conjecture.
Todd, briefly, you've been talking to the European markets this morning and the fund managers and finding out what's been happening. Is it just wait and see?
Well, I think it's very much wait and see. There's a lot of nervousness out there. It's reflected in the numbers you just gave on the European markets. They were trounced last week, and trading is very thin, and so the downside is exacerbated. But everybody is looking to New York. Psychologically, it is the biggest market, and financially, it's the biggest.
Todd, many thanks indeed. You can see exactly why New York